Hello and welcome everyone to the first ever Magma Classroom stream. I am Solomon here with Magma, and we have our very special guest today, Udi Kalmanovitz. Udi, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Great to see you, man.
You as well. You as well. I've been really excited about this one for a couple weeks now. For those that are tuned in, most likely it's because you've been following this event. If you're just catching this live or randomly, this is something that we're doing. It's actually a new stream that we're bringing to you guys that's focused on education. Udi is going to be your instructor today, and he's got a great lesson plan laid out for this particular stream, which we're going to get into. For those that have registered for this event, or just to let you all know, this is an event that requires you to register, particularly with Udi, which he'll be going into this. But essentially, what we wanted to try to do with this particular stream is to create more of an authentic instructor to student experience. So you'll actually see here at the bottom, we have a series of slides, and these are slides dedicated for the registered participants. So this particular event we're doing this way. We will do other Magma Classroom streams that will be more open and you'll be able to join. But in this case, Udi's going to be giving you guys great feedback for those that have registered, as well as critiques. And so the first hour we're going to be spending going through the lesson plan, going through the exercise. And the last hour will be kind of just free flowing. And I'm sure Udi's got some stuff to go into here. So if you are tuning in and you haven't received an email to get access to this space, go ahead and drop us a message in the stream chat. That would be the best place to work with us there. We're going to try to keep the Magma Canvas chat. If I can maybe just pull this up real quick, using the Magma chat here, we're going to try to keep this focus for the participants that are actually working on the exercise with Udi. So if you've got issues, you got stuff going on with stream, ping me in YouTube or Twitch, and we'll be able to communicate and figure out how to get you in there. Otherwise, a quick code of conduct review. So we have a policy on no safe for work content, no profanity, pornography, all of these things. Be kind of considerate of other members who are drawing in the same canvas. In this case, is actually not a big deal because everybody really has their own focused canvas. So that's great. Of course, not wanting to draw in other people's spaces. The participants have their own canvas, and technically speaking, you can jump from canvas to canvas, but this one, I think, is going to be an easy one to manage. We do have a 3-strike policy, so if you do not comply or go against these rules, we will be removing people. But we trust and believe everybody here is going to be very excited to stay within these lines. And then maybe lastly, the content that exists inside of Magma Classroom, because this is a new art space for this particular stream, we have other art spaces that are accessible for anybody. If you join our Magma Clubhouse stream, for example, we've got, I don't know, 1,000 or so, thousands of people that are members inside of that same art space, and people kind of just freely creating and using the space, which is awesome. But for this one, we're going to be managing a little bit more. So we want to keep this more focused on the people that participate. And so that means that if you have artwork that you're using or rather creating within this stream, make sure that you save this. You can hit Command or Control S very easily to just save that image right away, or rather go to File and export the image at the very end of the stream to make sure that you have a backup. So just wanted to let you all know on that. And I think without further ado, Udi, you want to take it away and give us a rundown of what we're planning on doing here today?
Yeah, sure. But maybe just mentioning, like, for the participants that already filled the form, to check that they are approved the invitation so they can actually access the canvas.
Yep, this is a good point. I have added most of you. There are a few members that I was not able to find your Magma ID or the email that you used to register, which means that you probably didn't receive this invitation to join this space. So if that's the case and you're just tuning in, drop me a message in the comments section, and I'll be able to provide an invitation. Of course, we want to keep this. If I send an invitation link now to the chat, anybody can join. So we're trying to keep this one exclusive to those registered participants. So yeah, I'll keep working through that, Udi, in the background, and feel free to take off and do your thing.
Sure, thanks, man. So okay, so what I planned to do for today, I will close like this. Like the other canvases, and let's go and start the presentation mode. Okay, so today I decided that I want to talk with the viewers about using different shapes when you're approaching designing a character. And I think that some of the concept of using different shapes and the basic shapes, it's more of a common knowledge. But I want to like maybe clarify about the way to really use them and think about shapes, and how basically to use shapes as tool to convey your idea, and help maybe to give like even a certain process or a certain system of using those shapes. So before actually starting talking about the basic shapes we all familiar with, I want to talk a little bit about how our brain processes images. So basically, our brain always receives or processes the biggest and or the bigger shapes first. So actually, our brain is very good to noticing silhouettes and big shapes and simple shapes first. And not long ago, I actually learned that when we process an image inside our brain, like one side of the brain processes the big shapes first, and then the other side of the brain processes all the different details and small details. So that's very interesting. But the reason I want to mention it is because even when we are creating an image, or even if we're creating a character, we need to think about like the biggest or the bigger shape first before going inside all the detail. And like that way we can actually create a system of approaching using shapes. So let's say that I want to create a character, and I'm thinking what shape should I use, and we'll go in depth about what different shapes can convey later on. But the beginning of the process, what you want to do is actually pick a shape that will fit the entire character. So it's not a shape for the body, it's not a shape for the head, it's a shape that will fit the entire character. So if I'm thinking about a character that should maybe look big and heavy, maybe I want to fit it inside a square. Maybe I want to taper the square a little bit. Maybe I want to take an oval shape for a different character. And that means that I'm giving like a certain hierarchy to approaching using shapes. So the first shape is the shape that will include the entire character, will fit the entire character inside. So if I'm using like, and it's of course it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to stick to each and every line of the outside shape, but it's a general idea. So let's say that if I use this square, I can do something like this. And maybe now I have like this big giant character that will actually give the feeling of being very big and very heavy and very, I don't know, steady. But I'm giving the general shape of the square, so I'm fitting the entire character inside. Once we do that, then we go to like smaller shapes. And the smaller shapes will be like the shapes we use inside the initial big shape we created. So let's say if I put my character inside this big shape over here, the smaller shape will be the shapes that I choose to use for the head, for the body itself, maybe for the arms, legs, and so on. And obviously we can mix those shapes. So that means that if I decided to start with a square that will fit the entire character, it doesn't mean that I have to proceed with only squares. So we can obviously mix and match to our advantages. And then let's say that I drill down even more, And then I say, okay, so now we have like the smallest shapes. So we went from something that fits the entire body to a smaller shapes, which are the head, the torso, the pelvis, the arms, whatever, maybe even the clothing, the equipment of the character. But these will be the smaller shapes. And then we actually have like the smallest shapes. So this can be the ears. This can be the shape that we're using for the nose. So maybe our nose is a big triangle. This can be the shape that we're using for the eyes. This can be also the shapes, the small shapes we use inside the character's face. Okay, so this will be like the smallest shapes. So it's actually giving us like a certain process that we can follow whenever we approach like designing a new character. So if I have an idea, I can say, okay, what should be like the bigger shape, the shape that will include the entire character inside. What I want like the character so for some reason I can't like pan inside. Maybe you went into presentation mode yourself.
Let me check. Let me see. Nope, I am not in any presentation mode. Maybe try to give it a quick refresh.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm thinking what should be like the shape that will fit the entire character. So if I want my character to be curvy, I want it to be square, I want it to be slim, I want it to be wide. What do I want to convey with that character? So I will start with the bigger shape. And then I will start thinking what I want the face to look like, what I want the head to look like. Do I want to use like I can even think of the style itself. Do I want to use like more angles and make the design a little bit more pointy or a little bit more curvy or a mix between the two? So then I'm thinking about like the smaller shapes. So here I'm thinking about an oval shape for the head too. And maybe we will do something like that. And I tried here to actually really fit the initial shape that I created. And because I used mostly like round shapes, I want to break it a little bit with like more pointy shapes or a little bit more triangular shapes. So maybe I can also create a triangular nose in here. It looks like the penguin. So let's just give him like. And when starting using different shapes, it's a good thing to think about like contrast. And it may be a little bit more advanced idea for what I was planning, but I will just go with the flow. So think about it that every time for our eye or our viewer's eye to catch something, he needs a little bit of contrast. Something needs to move, something needs to be like dark behind something that is bright, or the reverse. We need contrast to notice things and for things to catch our attention. So the same thing goes when playing with shapes. Let's say that if I create like all kind of ovals, and then I will put here this triangle. This triangle is automatically catching your eye, is catching your attention. He has contrast just for being a different shape. And it can be actually much simpler than that. If I'll draw like a series of lines, and then I will create a line that going in a different direction, it will immediately catch your eye. So if you think about that concept for a second, think of where do I want where do I want to pull or to focus my viewers' attention. So if I know that I want to focus my viewers' attention, first of all, or mostly to the face, I'm thinking, how do I create contrast that will grab the viewer's attention to the face? So we can achieve contrast in many ways. We can achieve contrast just by using colors. Like I can make the whole character dark and have the face like really bright, and I achieve contrast. But right now, because we're talking about shapes, I want you to know that I'm actually considering the same idea while using shapes. I can actually think of maybe I can use my shapes to create more contrast in a certain area. And the way to do that is mix contrasting shapes. So I have like the rounded glass thingy, and then I have like the rounded head, but I have also the pointy ears, the pointy nose, and these shapes are contrasting each other. Uh, Also, if I'm on the subject, I also think of like when I create details, where I want to focus most of my details. It's also something that can help me achieve contrast. So if I'll create another example like this one and this one, think of it that if I have like a frame, and inside this frame, I'm creating like all kind of spots scattered around. And then I have a certain area that has like really dense spots in a certain area. So that area will immediately catch my attention. So I think about it the same way when I actually thinking of the details in my character. So I will try to actually not go in too much details. Like it can be very tempting to do something like this. Let's create another layer, and then I can say, okay, let's give him like straps, and maybe also have like a watch or something here that goes here, and maybe also have like a color, and maybe have pockets. And it's not that doing all these things is wrong, but look like how right now the body is actually is battling for our attention, because we put all these different details, like there's too much happening inside, and our brain will automatically will want to figure out what is happening over there. So once we remove all this noise, then the face is getting the attention. So it doesn't mean that I can't like add something, but it's just something to keep in mind and try. Let's see. Mhm. Yeah. And try just to keep it in mind and be aware of how much detail you put in each and every shape or segment of your character. So let's go back and talk about the basic shapes. So for most of my students, initially, when they think about using shapes when drawing characters, they actually try to do it like too literally. That means that if I tell them, try to use a triangle to create a head, so automatically we start thinking like, okay, I have a triangle. I have a triangle. What do I know? What do I do now? Do I actually need to create my character inside the triangle? So the thing is, that we can approach shapes in two main ways as I see it, and try to explain it. One way will be a graphic approach. A graphic approach will be to take a shape and actually use it graphically, use it as it is. So a great example for this will be like a series like Phineas and Ferb. So we have like the triangle head, which is completely triangle. The other way is actually using the attributes, the character of the shape itself. What that means. So if we think of a triangle, and then I would start thinking like, what does this shape symbolize? What kind of mood do I think that the shapes give me? So I can say that a triangle is very sharp. I can say that the triangle is pointy. I can say it looks like a sign of something dangerous. I can say that it looks very steady or very unstable if I look at the triangle in reverse. So I'm thinking of what kind of feelings the triangle will give me. So mostly, which we kind of associate the triangle with things that are a little bit more dangerous, things that are a little bit maybe bad in a certain way, things that are sharp, are pointy, are that can harm us in a certain way. It doesn't mean that I can't look at the triangle as something steady or a triangle as something different, but let's take that way of thinking for a minute. So that means that I'm thinking of the characteristics, or like the attributes and the character of that shape. And I'm trying to take that and to apply that to my character. So I don't have to actually use the triangle literally. I have to use like to make it triangular-ish in a way. So maybe I can create something that will look a little bit more like this. So thinking of the biggest shape first. So this will be like the shape that will fit most of my character inside, or most of the head inside. But then I can still go and try to sculpt something in those areas inside the shape, while trying to remain to trying to keep in a way most of my shape. So right now, if I'm creating something like this, let's say. So okay, so most of my head, or most of the shape, is actually creating like this, the triangle outside, but it's not like a literal triangle. Okay, so I'm still giving the triangle feeling to it. And I also can use like the concept of using the attribute of the shape. I can also use it inside the small shapes. So think, try to start thinking like, when you're approaching each and every line that you create, you go to draw the nose. You can draw a nose and decide to do the nose with something like this, or you can decide to create the same nose basically, but do something like this. And it's not only the style behind it, it's actually what I want to make that specific character feel like. So here I'm basically using the feeling of the shape, and not the shape literally. And also I can use the shape graphically, as I've said before. Now, once we are deciding to use shapes, we can also create more complicated shapes. So not every shape that we would like to use will fit inside our basic shapes of the square, triangle, and the circle. So let's say that I'm creating a shape that will look something like this. And I'm trying to think of that shape like it's in a 3D space. Okay, so let's say this is my shape. So if I will try to ask myself, what is this shape, or where did it belongs more, to the circle team, the square team, or the triangular team? So obviously it's not a circle, but it does, or it do, it uses the circle attributes. It uses the character of the circle because it doesn't have like any angles and any points, and everything is very rounded and it's very fluid. And if we try to think like what the circle symbolizes and what we associate the circle with, so the circle can feel maybe a little bit more soft, a little bit more playful, a little bit jumpy, or something that can roll. It can be more spontaneous, a little bit more joyful, maybe even more feminine. So if I'm using a shape and it's not really a specific basic shape, it doesn't really make any difference in a sense of using the attributes of the shape. Because I can tell you that if I will look at it less in 3D point of view or more 2D point of view, I can tell you that this shape and this shape, let's say we'll go something like this. So basically, I can say that those are the same shapes. It's the same shape. It's the same general shape. But what I did is, like I said, let's give this one like the attributes of the circle. Let's give this one the attributes of the square. And I also can mix those two. So maybe I want a specific part to be a little bit more rounded, and a different part to be a little bit more squarish or more pointish. And we can have many reasons for that. So as I said before, maybe we want to mix those shapes to create contrast. Maybe we want to mix those shapes to create a certain feeling or a certain character to the face itself, to make the character look more, I don't know, evil, more crazy, more a little bit smarter or whatever. So we can mix and match those, but it's just like getting to a point when you, first of all, you actually give it a thought. You actually try to think about it. I think that for a lot of people, maybe you can relate to it when we're starting, like trying to design characters. A lot of people are mostly looking at other artists and reference, which is awesome, but they're trying to recreate what they're seeing and not necessarily thinking of what I want, what I'm doing to mean, what I want like this shape to mean right now. Why do I put my details here and not there? Why do I want to use like these certain shapes near the face and different shapes near the feet or whatever? So everything is affecting everything. Like it's all relative, and like a certain shape. Like if you create like a head inside a triangle, like I did before. So let's say I'm creating like this really triangular shape here, uh, and I'll create a triangular ear and a triangular nose, and everything is triangular. So right now, like nothing really has focus, nothing really has purpose. Like everything is competing with everything. But if I will take like those same shapes of the nose and the ear, and suddenly I will put it inside a rounded shape, then suddenly everything has a purpose. Okay, so it's something that to start doing it and start practicing it, it's more about starting to think about it before you're basically approaching your drawing and your character. So let's talk about proportions a little bit. So if we talked about shapes, and I will do like a little recap. So we said that when we approach creating shapes, we want to think of the biggest shape first, the shape that will contain the entire character, if we can. Sometimes if the character is doing like extreme pose or something, it's not really practical. But let's say we have a shape that contains the entire character, then we think like on the medium shapes, which will be the head, maybe the torso, the arms, and such. And then we will think of on all those fine details, and or the smallest shapes like ears, nose, pockets, belt, or whatever, like all the details. So this will be like a simple process to approach it. Also, we mentioned that we want to think of how we are mixing those shapes to create contrast, and create specifically contrast in places we want to catch the attention or focus the attention of the viewer. And also we talked a little bit about basically applying detail and trying to think even with the detail or the amount of detail we are putting in a certain area, if that helps our destiny to reach the destiny we want with the character, with the design or not. So another thing to keep in mind when we are using all those shapes is actually the proportion. Which shapes should be bigger, which shapes should be smaller, and so on. So a very known rule will be to basically avoid duplicating the same sizes. So I like how Stefan Silver refers to it. He calls it avoiding the leather. So basically, the leather is like this big shape that is divided. Uh, what did I do right now? Refresh it again. So it will be this shape that is divided into equal parts. And basically, what it does, it actually goes against what we just talked about with creating contrast. So if every shape is the same size, none of the shapes catches our attention. None of the shapes is more important than different one. They're basically, it's like they all have the same weight and the same part and the same importance, we can say. So avoiding the letter, the best way or the simplest way to think about it is doing something like creating a large shape, medium shape, and small shape, or large, we can call it big shape. It's the same. So medium, big, small, large, medium, small, wherever, however we want to call it. And obviously we can play around with the proportions in those. So if I create large, medium, small, I can make the large really large and the small really small. So I have room to play here. And also I can play, obviously, with the arrangement of those different parts. So maybe I want to create the small here, the large here, and the medium over here. Okay, so I can play with it and try to divide the shapes any way I want. So if we're thinking of this approach, that means that it actually connects to the process I've just showed you, which is thinking of the shapes that will make our character also as a large, medium, small. So I have the large shape that contains the entire character. the medium shapes, which are the head, torso, and those different parts, and the small shapes, which will be like the fine details. So I'm actually using the same concept, and now we're using this concept for actually dividing those medium shapes inside the character. So let's say that I'm creating this large shape. So this will be like the shape that I want to begin with. And then I want to think like how I want to divide these shapes into a large, medium, small in any way that I want. So right now, let's say that I want to make, let's say that the head will be the small part. So I will probably put some kind of head inside here somewhere. And then I want the body to actually be like the medium part, and the large part will be the legs that will go like in this direction. So I created some kind of arrangement, for this character, which I decided what part do I want to create, like the smallest, the biggest, or the medium part. And also, once you are like trying to think of different ideas, go ahead and try to play with it. So that means that mostly I won't probably go and finish like my first sketch. Usually if I want to sketch or think of a character, I will probably create like a few of very doodly, scribbly tests or ideas that I want to test. But if I have like the same flow, the same gesture, or the same general big shape, I can actually think, what if my head will be bigger and the body will actually be the bigger size, the biggest size, and the feet or legs will be the medium size. So I can go ahead and try thinking of different segments and see how it makes the character feel and how it makes me feel, and try to explore as much as you can. Now, exactly as we did for the first idea of taking a shape that contains the entire character, and then like going and approaching like the medium shapes and then the smaller shapes, we will take this approach and we will do the same. So that means that initially, when I want to design the character, I'm thinking of the whole character and how I want to divide this character to different segments, to large, medium, and small segments. Now I can dive in, and let's say that I picked a certain sketch and I really like the proportion I got there. Now I can dive in and let's say, okay, let's focus now entirely on the head. And once we do that, we basically keeping the same approach. So that means that inside the head, I can also try different ways to divide the spaces where I put the details inside the head. So let's create like this. Let's create, I don't know, initial shape. Let's go with something that is a little bit more square this time. So let's say that this is like my base. And let's try to duplicate it a few times. So I think I can, like, this is cut and merge. Yep. So let's put this one here and let's do another one. I don't even need the selection. Okay, so I have like the shape of the head laid out, And let's create like the facial features in different. Um, let's merge this down just a sec. Okay, so let's create the different features on a different layer, and I want you to see what happens if we take like the same features and try to move them around a little bit and play with it. So let's put like the first features where they are more, let's say, expected to be. So I have like this area protruding for the eyebrows, and maybe his eyes would be like this hollow, rounded eyes, something like so. And let's put his nose right here and his mouth right here. So right now, what I did is I actually put everything where it's probably more most expected to be. So first of all, we want to play with that a little bit, so it won't be very boring. But take a look what happens if we'll take like the same facial features and try to move them around a little bit. So let's start by grabbing the nose and maybe try to make it a little bit closer to the eyes. So that's already creating a totally different feeling. Let's try to also do something that it would actually will be a little bit more exaggerated or more daring. So what will happen if we'll actually put the entire I don't know, let's put the nose and the mouth together. So we will take the mouth, we will make it much closer to the nose, and let's grab those two and just take a look what will happen if we will change the position of it. So what will happen if we put everything here, or we'll do it. Oh, I like that also. This is actually more interesting for me. So I want you to notice something. Once we're starting moving the features inside the face, what happens is that we're actually dividing the face into different segments, and we're using the same concept from before. So right now, the reason this will feel actually maybe a little bit more boring, because everything is divided, like look at the different segments here. Everything is kind of divided in equal spaces, okay? And then we have this, and maybe like the forehead is like the, the biggest space. And if we try to also look at the space from here to the space here, which is almost equal, and to the space here. So no matter how we look at it, it feels like more equal eventually. And here we can have like this very small part, this medium part, or this big part. So it feels a little bit like, and also we have here this part, and then everything is here. And maybe I would probably try to move things a little bit more, maybe create the chin a little bit bigger. But the bottom line is that you want to try to do the same with avoiding the ladder, and try to be more versatile with your proportion. You also want to do it inside the face itself. Like, don't go straight away to putting everything where it is expected to be, especially if you are trying to create characters that have like more character. And like usually most of the hero characters are a little bit more boring design wise, because like everything they usually are very pretty and handsome, and everything is just how it's supposed to be, supposed. But when creating like more interesting character, you want to create villains, you want to create orcs, you want to create, I don't know, witches, fairies, then you can play around with things and create something that is a lot more interesting to look at. So what I want to do right now is I want to actually demonstrate a process that I will let you guys try for yourself in 15 minutes. Uh, and this process is actually thinking of or basically getting a short brief for a character. You can try to invent and come up with those briefs for yourself, just as an exercise. Uh, and then play around with everything we talked about today, with the different shapes, starting with a big shape that contained the character, then going into higher resolution, but doing all those things while you're still thinking of the brief, of the main concept of the character and what you're trying to achieve. Because eventually we can play with the shapes as much as we like, but the character should meet the brief. So I will show you just for a second that I actually created a short brief for you. And when I give like exercises to my students, or if I do it for myself, I have like this simple approach where I think of like, let's say 3 or 4 different attributes which are more visual and physical, things that we can actually see. It can be like for in the clothing, it can be like the character build or something like this. And also I try to think of 4 or 3 things that are more in the character itself, like different, if the character is smart, if the character is funny, or stuff like that. So uh, once we will start, you will see that you have a brief for your exercise. And I want to say that you can actually take this brief and decide if you want to create a male character or female character or whatever you like. So it doesn't have to be this or that, but the concept should remain the same. So what you will be creating, you can already start thinking on ideas while I will demonstrate. Uh, what you will be doing, you will be creating a villain character of this treasure hunter. So this treasure hunter is very bad guy, is basically maybe kills or screwing everybody to try to put his hands on the treasure. He will have, or she will have, an athletic build. They will have tattoos on the face and on the neck. They should look like very grimy character. They will have one murky eye, like one eye which will be darker or brighter. And necklace, a big necklace with like this big relic pendant. It could be like a relic that he basically gets, like maybe special kind of powers from it. And also to describe a little bit more about the character itself. So it will be cruel, and it should look like not to be trusted. It should look that he has street smarts, and is very confident and unpredicted. Maybe he's a little bit crazy. Okay, so this will be your brief. But right now I will jump back to my canvas. And I thought for an idea for me to actually demonstrate the process. So I won't be doing the same brief because I don't want to get something stuck in your head. I want to see what you will create. But I was thinking like maybe creating this mobster character which likes to play tennis. And basically what he does, he grabs like the person he wants to get money out of, and he ties them, and then he serves them tennis balls. So that's my idea. So what I was thinking is like creating this character to be short. I want them to be rounded, but I also try to use a little bit of pointy shapes and angular shapes to create like this nice mix and contrast inside the shapes. So let's see how it goes. The first stage is very important. It's like basically a scribbly doodle. Don't try to
Udi,
judge yours. Yeah,
one quick thing, if I think if at this stage, if we're, it sounds like we're getting into the work session here. I think for this one, it would probably make sense if we get out of presentation mode so people can, and I'll capture your screen for the stream, and that way we can kind of go through it and do it that
sure
way.
thing, man. Sure thing. Yeah, excellent. So I will just go ahead, and if our viewers actually want to start working on their canvases, they can. Once I will be done with my humble demonstration, so then I will probably will start switching canvases and take a look at what people are doing.
Yeah,
Uh,
while you're getting into that, maybe just a quick thing, because we did set this up where we had 15 registrants, but I'm seeing as of right now we have Stupid Ryu is on, Dima is on, and the rest we at this point we don't have inside of the session. So at this point, what do you think? Would you be open to? I could send an invitation to join the space, and anybody who's watching currently can jump in, and we can set them up with a canvas. How do you feel about that, Udi?
I don't mind that at all. Like what will we decide? I going with the flow.
Cool. All right, you do your thing, and I'll chat with those that are watching. If anybody wants to join, I'm going to send a link right now so you can participate, and I'll be chatting with you to set you up with a canvas.
Awesome. Okay, so what I was thinking of is actually trying to use like this pretty oval shape, uh, and I want like the character to be short, and I also want to make sure that I have some kind of points to it. So maybe I'll start with something like this, which is pretty rounded, but also I cut it like really short and have some angles in there, and maybe create another one which will be a little bit more, a little longer, and maybe I will actually create another curve inside here. So I'm trying to play around and actually get a shape that will feel nice for me. And obviously, I already imagined more or less what I want to put inside. Um, One thing I want to make sure that, or maybe I want to explain or to let you know, is once I'm creating those shapes, two main keys that I try to follow is actually not putting like the, let's say, the angles or curves one next to another, like parallel to each other. So if I have like a curve here, I would probably put the curve that is in front of him in a different height to create an angle, and not something like this will create something a lot more static. Or if I have a curve on one side, I might consider using a straight line on the other side. And it all goes back to contrast. And here it goes a little bit to rhythm and flow. Um, So it's something to keep in mind, and maybe I will go into depth about that a different time. So let's create another shape and then try to see what we can come up with. So here I will go with something that is a little bit more squarish and rounded as this at the same time. So let's go with something like so, and let's see what we can come up with. So here, it's not that I can break out of the shape. Like the shape, it's a general idea. So here I'm thinking that maybe I'll have like his torso here. He will have maybe shorts, tennis shorts. He will have his tennis shorts here, and then very small feet with tennis shoes. So obviously is very stocky, and maybe he has like this V-neck, and probably I want his face to go over here somewhere, like to be the smaller shape. So I have like a smaller shape, a medium shape. Sorry, this will be the large shape, and this will be the medium shape, more or less. And then I will have maybe his arm, one arm here. He will probably have like this, maybe a gold bracelet or watch, a few hairs on the arm. Maybe he will have his tennis racket here. And now I'm beginning to think of like the smaller shapes to it. So let's say that I want to dive dive deeper to the head, and let's put his here, and let's give him like this big nose. Maybe I'll try to make the nose actually a little bit more triangle. Okay. And probably let's create, I want to give him a cigar, but if I'll create the cigar in this side, I will probably miss a little bit of the effect of it. So I want to actually have it go to the other side. And maybe I will decide later how I want to solve it, because that means his mouth should go to the other side. But I'm thinking here maybe on the silhouette itself and not only the shapes. So if it will work here, I will take it over there probably. And let's do something like this. Maybe it's also have like this big gold chain. Okay. So this will be like the first try. And let's try to create something a little bit different, and let's try to fit it inside the second shape and see how that goes. So every time I'm going to do like a second option, I try to look on what I initially did and think, what do I like in this first try, and what I don't like. So right now, I do like the very short legs, which I'll probably try to keep. And I like the idea of like the polo shirt and the chain hanging under the neck in the polo shirt. So I'll probably try to keep this idea. Maybe I will try something a little bit different for the face. Let's see. Um, so here, I will go ahead and also try to quickly divide my shape to like smaller segments. This will probably be the center. And I'm going with the small feet here as well. Also, it's very important to check when you're, especially when you're putting the feet, that you get a feeling of balance. Like try sometimes, even if you're working in these exaggerated 2D shapes, try, I call it the 3D printer test. Try to imagine that you actually print your character in a 3D printer, and imagine you're putting it on the desk, and try to imagine if it will stand the way you put it or it will fall down. Okay, so always try to keep your character well balanced. And I will create the head here and we'll cut the body a little bit. So I like the shape of the arm I previously used. Like this character looks a little bit bigger. Maybe I will decide to have it holding, I don't know, the bat, something like this. And I will go for the polo collar with like the big necklace. And maybe the big bracelet on the hand. And something to keep in mind as well is when you're creating different ideas for your characters, it's very easy, especially if you're using your imagination. It's very easy to think in like this very iconic association of how we actually grasp different things, like visual things, like how we think of a baseball, sorry, not baseball, like a tennis racket, or how do we think of a tennis shirt. So here it's very important to one use reference, not reference necessarily for the pose of the character, reference to see how a tennis shirt will look, how a tennis racket is actually looking, to make your character or your design a little bit more believable. And another thing to keep in mind is like try to give your character something specific. And what I mean by that, if let's say I create a character of this tennis player, so he has a tennis shirt, a tennis pants, shorts, tennis shoes, and he's just like this very generic tennis player. But if I want to make like the character to be like to stand on its own, I want to give like the character something specific, so the viewer can actually remember him and say, "Oh, it's the tennis player with the glass eye. It's the tennis player with the big sleeve tattoo on his arm. It's the tennis player with the, I don't know, specific haircut." So try to go specific on certain things to make your character like unique. So here we're going in this like idea of creating like this mobster, or like this bad criminal, and he's basically playing tennis. And let's try to go with something different for the head here. So I want to create like this really, really short forehead, which I like. But maybe I will go with a bit more rounded shape for the nose here. So see that I'm going with something that still has points to it. It's still pointy, but is also a little bit rounded. So it's a bit more complex. And here I will try to take his mouse in this direction and see if I can make it like look that it grabs the cigar in a believable way. So maybe I will just do something like so, like this. And let's keep them bold. Okay, so what do you say? Will we take a look and see what's going on in different canvases?
So you have just a quick update. There is, I think, Dima is working. A
Yeah,
lot of people have been
Sidima.
watching you.
Yeah, sure. So I will give it another one, so and another shot. So I will go on those canvases in a few minutes. So if everyone, if there is someone else watching and want to actually start working, you can start working, and I will join you soon. Um, what I want you to see is, at least for me, like most of the times, like the second shot that I give, like the sketch, is it's most of the time a lot better than the first one. So I do occasionally feel like I'm nailing it on the first shot, but most of the time, like the second one is much better because I think important as it is to know what you want to do, it's very important to figure out what you don't want to do. And sometimes, like this first like the first test that you're doing, you actually putting everything you have in mind out, and you also figure out what you don't want to do, what you're trying to avoid. Um, so I have another shape that I put over here, which the idea will be to create like the body a little bit more square and less rounded. So I will keep like right now the same segments which I liked. So I didn't really try to change those, like the way that I divide the different shapes. Uh, Probably I would have tried also creating something that has like maybe smaller, like more thin legs instead of like this very thick uh, short legs, and see how it will look.
Hey,
And
Nexus has a question on whether or not you want it to be cartoony or not.
so I suggest to actually try to make it look cartoony, and I will explain why. It doesn't have to be like everyone can do like what he wants, and go with a style that is appealing to you. But I feel like when trying and learning like concepts of playing with shapes and proportions, the more cartoony you go, the more you can actually try to push and pull those shapes until they break down and you say, okay, this is too much. But when you're actually trying to create something that is a little bit more realistic, it's very limited, it's very constrained. You probably want you pull and push those shapes and those proportion as much as you could if you try something that a little bit more cartoony. So I feel like doing cartoon characters is actually better for actually getting a grasp on those concepts. But obviously, you can do whatever you want. So here I will actually try to make like the head go inside the body a little bit, like it's hunched over or something. And also will create the head much smaller. And let's not go over this character, so we'll take it a little bit here. Let's also give him a gun. He is a criminal. Why not give him a gun? So he has a gun here, and he has the bat in his other hand. Like, I think that if we will take a look at most like tennis slash polo shirts, t-shirts, I think they actually have like this. I'm sure it has a name, but they usually have like this band at the end of the sleeve. So again, I will put his other arm here. And maybe we will also give him like a vest. So maybe he has like a tennis shirt and this vest. And he's like this big, heavy dude. So, like for this one, I'm not sure that I want to actually give him the necklace. Maybe like sometimes if you get a brief, if something is in the brief, like if I will approach it like I actually received the brief for this character, then if the brief says necklace, you go and you put a necklace. So let's also add it, and let's try to go with something a little bit different, maybe for the face. Why not give him like a hat, like this beret, like mine? So let's give him like a hat, and maybe he has his nose like right under here. And I'm not sure on the cigar for this one. So here, no matter in which side I will put the cigar, I won't get the cigar to appear outside of his silhouette. So I will actually take it to the other side. So obviously I want to create like this big of a cigar. So let's put like his cigar over here or something. Something that I try to avoid is like creating tangents, which means that if I create a cigar here, I try to not make the cigar end up exactly where is the line of the face or exactly on the line of the color. So you always want to stay away from one line needs to stay away from the other line or to overlap it. So let's put his cigar here. Maybe have like his small chin over here or something. Okay. So I created like those three different options for our tennis playing mobster. And right now, what I feel is actually I kind of like this one the most, like just the character itself. It looks like a bad guy that can actually be deep down inside a nice guy. But if I will have to say who will probably look the meanest or the most dangerous, I would think that this one is actually looks a little bit more menacing or more scary. The face needs some more work, but yeah. So this is basically like the approach, and usually what I do after this part is I pick my favorite version, And then I take this version and I try to duplicate it a few times. And I actually like to further explore. So once I have like my favorite version, I duplicate it a couple of times, and then I'll try to explore a little bit more, like go with a different nose, go with a little bit of different hair, try to mix a little bit, mixing things with the details, and also I will do a little bit of cleanup along the way. So let's say that here I want to try like giving like this tennis sleeve that I did. Now let's create a new one and take the opacity up. Oh, I duplicated instead of, that's why I didn't understand. Okay. So I can try here and say, let's see what happens if we'll give him like the short tennis sleeve. Maybe I want to pop out his like elbow, and I need to think: will this make my design actually closer to what I want, or it will uh, actually make it less of what I want? So I think actually keeping like this curve very simple is actually will be more beneficial for this design. Then obviously we'll create the same idea on his other arm. And here is the part when you can play around with things, like maybe try to change a little bit gesture of the hand. Maybe he actually can hold a cigar in those fingers. And while I'm doing that, I also doing a little bit of cleanup. So when we actually started the initial sketch, it was very doodly, and it should be very loose. I think that sometimes we're actually creating like an obstacle for ourselves when we try to judge what we're coming up with too soon. We're trying to sketch, and we look at the initial sketch, and then we don't like what we see, and it affects us too much. So try not to judge yourself while doing these ideas. Like, try to think that you have to try everything that you have inside your head to figure out what works and what doesn't. I'm actually thinking of creating like folds here and make his pants a little bit thinner so they will look very tight. I think that will be actually kind of funny. Okay, so as you can see, like I try to clean it up a little bit, and maybe add some more details on the way, and try a little bit different things. So if I will go back and create another version over the first one, I will probably change up a little bit the sleeves, maybe maybe put the shirt outside of the pants, or basically still play around with it. Like, don't think of like taking the initial sketch and going over and clean that okay, it's done. You can actually still try and play around with stuff. And usually from my experience, the more you give things a try, the end result will look much better, because it will have things that you probably wouldn't be thinking of if you will just went and go ahead with the first try. So it's very important to keep that in mind. I want to make his eye a little bit smaller. So here I'm not changing the face much. Not really sure about the way his mouth is grabbing the cigar right now, but I won't waste time over that right now. Maybe he also have some chest hair, and yeah, I actually kind of like it. So this will be our mobster uh, playing tennis. So yeah, let's go ahead and see if you guys uh, have any progress or things that we can take a look at. So I see right now, let's go and jump to this canvas and see what's going on over here. So this is the canvas of Ori, right? Yeah. So one thing that I will suggest, and I also suggest for Yuri, is like try to get the habit of avoiding details too early. So right now, it feels like Ori is still in the initial phase of deciding the big shape, the shape that will create the entire character. So I will allow myself to create a new layer, and or if it's okay with you, I will just draw a little bit a concept. So let's say that you have like this character, you know that you already plan to have like this long jacket and maybe like a certain pants or whatever. So I would probably try to do something like, okay, maybe define where I would like the head to go. But then even if I have like a general idea, like I want them to have like this color open or something like that. It's very easy to go and start drawing and start getting diving into those details. I think that what will actually be better is actually creating like these big shapes that basically set up the entire mood. So let's say that right now I'm creating something like this, and then I can actually populate it. So then I can say, okay, he has like this big color that is open in a certain way, and I now I can think what I want him to do with this arm. And another thing that I want to suggest is that try to think of everything as an action. What do I mean by that? I mean that sometimes if you go and you draw a certain arm, then the arm can suddenly just be like doing something, like the arm is in the air, like what the arm is doing, like. So try to think of an action, and even uh, some actions can be actually kind of passive, like even waiting, it's an action. You actively waiting or passively waiting, I don't know, but think of it of different actions. So even waiting, thinking, so when you start thinking of those things as actions, then you see like that even like an action like waiting has like its own body language. So you will start get ideas of what I want the character to do with her arms. Like he needs to have his arms in the pocket, maybe uh, maybe the arms are holding something, but trying to think a little bit of the action and a little bit of the story. So I see that he's supposed to have something behind his back. like this serrated knife or something. But what I wanted to say, which will probably be most important for my for my let's say tip here, is that try to think of the biggest shape first. So if you look at it, like this version of Rick is created, is like already a lot more detailed, and I can see like right now hints of anatomy and things, which are fine because a lot of times we're actually starting to build like our mannequin underneath. But in this particular case, I would suggest to actually not going into like all the technicals of anatomy and those things at first. Try to make it be more about the mood, more about the atmosphere. So look at the way that I just let the character stand, and his like coat is dropping down, and is creating like this big uh, like this very big and clear shape. And sometimes when we're too soon, we're jumping too soon to create like all kind of small shapes for anatomy and stuff like that, we're actually like shooting ourselves in the foot. So sometimes for the story, for the mood, for the atmosphere, it will be much better to actually see how we can convey the idea very simplistically. Like if we can convey the idea with like, it's it's like it's like taking a very complicated sentence that uses too many words that are not necessary to get the point across. So we're trying to refine it and actually use only the words that are necessary to get the point across, if it makes any sense. So, Ori, you can hide this. I will leave it on, but you can obviously hide it if you like, and it interrupting you. And feel free to ask a question if you like. So I will take a look at the chat from time to time myself. Let's see what Dima is doing. Okay, so a few things. Like, first of all, I see that there is a little bit of issue, which is not very important in this stage, with the legs, which is like this leg looks like it's pointing like backwards a little bit. So I imagine, let's see if I can actually add a layer in your canvas, Dima. Yes, I can. So this leg is basically going inside, and it seems a little bit, not, it's not that it's not possible, but it seems a little bit like not unnatural. So whenever you place your character, it doesn't especially if it's a little bit more realistic in its anatomy, but whenever you place your character, if you wanted to like stand casually, waiting, smoking a cigar, talking on the phone, holding a gun, but basically it's standing, it's not doing like a super dynamic pose. So it's very important that try not to stretch too much the limits of the character's flexibility. What do I mean by that? Is that, like, if you think about it, when we're doing something casually, our body will automatically will want to achieve the feeling of comfort. We want to be comfortable. You're not waiting, like, even if I'm waiting, I don't know, waiting for a bus. and I want to look in a certain direction, and I'm looking this way. So probably if I look this way for too long, then I will start to feel like my neck muscles, and it won't take me long to actually turn my body to where I want to face. You won't see someone like probably you won't see someone standing in a bus station looking this direction and he's like really twisting his neck and he's he's putting a lot of stress on the neck and it just stays like that, so it will look unnatural. So the same will go with the feet. Like try to see if you're casually standing, walking, and then stopping. Like see how you will put your feet. So maybe one foot is going forward and maybe one foot is a little bit aside, but it probably won't be something that is too putting too much stress on the body. Then it will feel unnatural. So that will be like the first thing. Another thing is that I will actually divide this character a little bit differently. So, it, like where we actually divide the character is debatable. It's not that we always make it like a head, a torso, or and legs, because it's very easy to think of it as this is like my small shapes and maybe the torso. We need to see like when you think of the torso you also include the pelvis as well, so then these shapes becomes very big, and then these are a little bit smaller shapes. But sometimes even putting something like a belt will actually can change the way our eye will divide the shapes. So like the belt and also like this pinch over here will give us the notion that this is where the shape will end. And then I will actually think of the bottom part as a different shape. So in that sense, it actually looks better. But what I feel actually happens here is that because this leg is going here, it almost seems like the legs are at one piece. It almost makes my eye, let me just like, I will get rid of this. It almost makes my eye to think of like this as one shape, and I have this shape over here, and then I have like the bottom part of the belt, and it makes this division a little bit too equal for me. So it also depends on the style itself, of course, but I would probably try to exaggerate things a little bit and make like the legs shorter or longer, but just make like the difference in those shapes a little bit more noticeable. So that will be one suggestion. And also, I think that I would probably, instead of actually going to detail and try to refine the sketch, I will try to keep it looser and give it a few more shots. Like try to create like five, six different tests, and it should be very doodly. You can really avoid like going in details and refinement in the first stages. So let's say that I'm going and see, okay, I want them to be athletic build, and I want them to be confident. So that means that I probably want them to stand straight, up straight, and stuff like that. But I can try to do something very simple. So I'll do it on this side because I have more room. So I'll probably go and say, okay, this will be probably the head, and this will probably be the body, and I want them to be like this strong big character, and this will probably be where I will put eventually his legs, and I won't go into too much depth. So I will look at this like quick doodle, I will look at this is basically almost like my first try is almost done. So this is where you want to start. And then I will think, what if I'll do something similar, but I will actually create, let's say, is waist a little bit more narrow. So I will give him like the same body, but much narrower waist and much narrower pelvis. And then I'll create something like this. And you see here as well that I'm not going into detail. I'm trying to get like what is general shape will look, what is general feeling will be. And I can actually try a few of those. And only once I get a feeling like, for instance, here, I actually like this one. So let's duplicate it. So I think it actually duplicated both of them. Let's see. So I'll grab only this one. So let's say I grab this one, and then now I can actually turn the opacity a little bit off, and I can actually duplicate it a couple of times or more than that. And then I will try to start thinking about details, because I feel like I already have like my basic structure or basic shape already established. So here is where I will try to think of what his hair will be. Maybe I want, I don't know, give him a certain hat or whatever. But I will try to go into like making like the smaller decision. This is where I will approach. But see that right now, when I'm starting creating a little bit of, it's not even details, it's just like another layer of decisions. It's so much easier because I have already I already gained confidence in the shape and the proportion that I initially laid out. Because once I took a look at that, and I say, okay, I like the way it feels. So I already have like a confidence that once I will put like a character and start to establish the character on top of it, I already have a feeling that it will turn up pretty nicely because I already like the proportions. So let's say that I want to now make this character probably holding a gun as well. And it will have like his arm full of tattoos. And I'm not here, oh, I won't go in actually creating the tattoos. I'm just scribbling to get like the feeling of it. And maybe I will scribble a little something on the neck as well. So it's already looking like a little bit more suspicious, sus. And let's try to think of like what will I imagine like his feet will be. So maybe I'll give him like boots, and his like jeans will be inside uh, his boots or something. But the general idea is eventually like try to figure out the shape first, uh, and go into detail later. So if you will have like a good foundation for your details, it will be so much easier, and you'll probably like what you're doing much more than like creating an not so steady foundation. And then no matter, even if your details are you have great ideas, they probably won't look as good as you want them. So here I just want to create like, I don't know, it's supposed to be like to have like this one bad eye. I think it should look like a little bit more angry. And we also said that we will give him like this, maybe like this big ancient relic or something that will be around his neck or whatever. But yeah, so try to keep it really general at first. Try to keep it general. Try to get like the body language. Try to think about like a little bit of maybe like the posture of your character and the way you want to divide it, and only then go into details. Like in this stage, it doesn't really matter what he wears or anything. It's just like to get like the this initial feeling for it. Okay. So Ori, I feel it. It's already much better. It's like it reads a lot more. It's read clearly. So very simplified. Um, yeah. So you actually took the suggestion and did exactly what I meant. So that looks great. Now, when creating the legs, a few things to keep in mind. Try to think if your character has his weight on one leg more than the other, or maybe is spreading his weight evenly on both legs. So it's one thing to keep in mind. So usually when someone is spreading his weight equally on both legs, he will actually look a little bit more alert, a little bit more engaged. The reason being is that once we feel comfortable, like we usually tend to like move our weight from one leg to other. We let one leg rest while we put our weight mostly on one leg. So you get like this little bit movement of the pelvis whenever we shift our weight from one leg to the other. Uh, Usually when someone actually divides his weight equally to both legs is where he's alert, is basically he's been told to stand up straight. If you look at like a bouncer at an entrance of a nightclub, he will stand up straight and he will divide his weight evenly on both legs. If you look at a soldier that is standing, so basically when you put weight on both legs, sometimes it can make the pose actually feel a little bit more tensed. Even that it less dynamic, it actually can make it a little bit more tensed.
Hey, Udi, I wanted to point out real quick because we got about 15 minutes or so on the schedule. We did have a few final joiners towards the end. We've got about 4 new people. If it's the list is getting pretty long there if you scroll to the right.
Mm-hmm. Oh, amazing. Cool stuff. So let's see what we going what we got going over here. Nexus. So I really like what you're doing. Actually, I usually try to divide designing the body and designing the face into 2 different segments altogether. So most of the time, I will go with the same approach, the same process that I've showed you. But usually, I won't go into too much detail with the face, or I'll have a general concept for the face. Then I will duplicate the face just the same as I do with the body, and I will try different things with the face. Um, So I really like what you're doing. I like the messy beard and those pointy edges. I think it really fits the character nicely, and I really like the idea of like giving him like this lens or this goggles or whatever it will be. So that looks great. I want to talk a little bit about designing characters in a pose. So it's something to think about. So I think that a lot of people, where they think of the character, it's sometimes actually kind of easier to relate to the character and to imagine the character when you think of the character in a pose. It's almost like you feel the way it moves, you feel the way it behaves, which is awesome. But something to keep in mind: if you're creating like different versions of your design, and on every version you will change the pose, you won't necessarily know if what make one version better, one design better than the other, it's because you changed something in the design itself, or because you changed the pose. So let's say you did a new version for your character, and you change a little bit the shape of the head, you change a little bit the shirt, you change a little bit, I don't know, different details. And also you change the pose that the character is positioned in. So then you say, wow, this design looks much better, but maybe it's just the pose that is much better. Maybe if you take the first version and you'll put it in the second pose, it will look even better. So for me, when I design a character, I usually try to make all my version in the same angle and the same pose, because I'm feeling like the pose is not necessarily the story, it's more the model itself, the way the character looks. I do differentiate between a pose and body language, which means that I do think of the posture. I think if the character is shy or confident, if it's very energetic or tired, I do think about the posture. I would probably think of what I want the character to do with the arms. I'll try to, I will give it like more of a casual pose, standing pose, but I'll try to like sometimes mostly avoid like designing with a very dynamic pose, because sometimes like extremely dynamic pose will also like hide the shapes. So I want the character to be very clearly in front of the camera, so I can see the relations between all those shapes. And then when I have the design, I can play around with different poses. I know that for some people it's actually much more engaging and intuitive to design in a certain pose, but something to keep in mind. If you're trying different version, do keep in mind that you change the pose and not only the character. So take it into consideration when you're thinking of what's working and what's not working. So great stuff. Um, let's see what we got here. I like it. So what I would probably do is actually not something that is. I have a few suggestions. Some of them are more relating to the design, and some of them actually to the pose itself. So we see the character is leaning to our left, right? And if the character is leaning to our left, that means that his left foot is actually handling most of the weight, like most of the weight of the body. So if we'll keep that foot a little bit straighter or even straight, it will actually, for me, feel more believable. Because if I will put like my weight on a certain leg, if I keep that leg bent, then this leg should really like you know, to be engaged and give an effort to actually hold my weight. So I'll probably just go bone alignment, a straight leg, and then it will feel more that the weight is being carried on that leg. So that's one thought I had in mind. Another one, I try to remember this sentence because it's actually clicked for me once I heard it, or once I heard it when I heard it the first time. Sorry. So every time you have something that goes around the character or around a certain part of the character, it's like you've been handed a gift. And that something should mostly be used to actually convey the depth of that shape. So let's say that we have like this strap around the waist over here. Okay. So I have this strap around the waist here, and what happens is that basically, like I'm getting the feeling of volume in different parts of the character. Like the arm is look like 3D. I can see the volumes of the arm. I can see the head going around the head. So I can feel the different volumes. I can see the chain, which is done beautifully, going around the shoulders, around the body. And then we're using the belt or the strap here, and we cut the body in two straight lines that makes the waist look flat. So I think that going with what you initially were doing, which is using the different elements to convey volume. So every time that I'm going to draw a character, if it has like a watch, a bracelet, a sleeve, those are all gifts. Those are all things that I can use as like volume lines and convey the volume of the different shapes. So don't skip on those. Uh, One more thing that I wanted to mention, it's sometimes hard to notice while we're working, but try to avoid tangents. So if you look a little bit over here, so I have like this spot where the sword is actually meeting the line of the arm, which is kind of strange. So the way to avoid it is actually maybe you either want to keep the distance or you want to overlap it. So that means either I want to finish the sword here and give it a little bit of space, or I want to make it a little bit longer and overlap it. But either one of those options is much more readable and understandable than two shapes or two different objects that are suddenly meeting on the same line. So I would probably try to make it shorter, but it's obviously up to you. I really like the chain. I really like the facial expression you had going here, and yeah, nice work, very nice. Okay, so I really like the posture of the character, and I really like the tattoos on the chest, which are awesome. Um, I have few things in mind. First of all, obviously, it's just an exercise, but let's say that for those of you who actually look at illustration and character design as something they want to do professionally, so actually, like sticking to the brief is very important. And sometimes I find myself carried away with trying different things, and then suddenly something catch my attention, and I see that I uh, missed something in the brief or added something that might make it go in a different direction. So it's not like we can't suggest things that are not in the brief. Let's say I want to add a scar. It's something that I can probably take the risk because I do create like this character which the scar will fit. But I can also think, maybe if my client wanted the character to have a scar, it will probably be in the brief. But what I need to make sure more is to actually stick to what is already in the brief and make sure that it's there. So let's say that if we are talking about like an ancient relic, okay, so it has like this ancient relic. So if we create a chain and then we hide the pendant behind the hands, or we are not creating a dependent, maybe he's even holding it, holding the pendant, the relic in his hands, but we can't see it. So for now it doesn't really exist in the character. So that's something that I would make sure that is very noticeable in what I would do. Also, he has tattoos on the face and neck. So you created the tattoos, probably you will create on the face as well. I actually started creating on the arms. I didn't stick to the brief myself. Another thing that is a little bit more technical and not a design thing is try not to take both feet to both sides. So as I said before, if you will just observe the way you stand most of the time, especially if right now your character is very engaged, is doing like this motion and action, which is very engaged in what he's doing or feeling right now. So try to avoid this. Okay. Now you can actually do it if you create something that has the visual language that allows it. Like the more something is simplified, or the more something is not taking himself too seriously, you can go ahead and do those. Like if I create something like that, so nobody will care that I actually put like both feet like in both sides, right? Because I don't know even what it is, but it's not meant to be like realistic. But if you look like the way you position the hands, which is very realistic, like the pose, the hands itself, the face you're using, so then it also kind of asking to have a more realistic posture and more realistic position to the feet as well. And usually, if you look at most shoes, like most shoes probably won't be like this thick. So I would probably try to go with something, even if it's a boot, try to go with something that is a little bit thinner. And so, and it depends on what you obviously had in mind. But what you want to do with feet is try to simplify it to a very crude and simple shape, that you will be able to make this shape like foreshortened and go towards you. So let's say if I look at the feet in perspective, and I think about the feet as like this tapering shape. So I have a shape that if I will look at this shape from the side, it will look something like this. Okay, so then I will start to ask myself if I can now actually try to turn this shape into different directions and make it like actually turn to my direction. Let's say I have like the ankle going inside here. So this is very important, and you don't have to go and actually make the feet go straight ahead every time. You can probably make it pretty believable and work fine with having like a small angle, but it will look much more realistic than having both legs pointing each in a different direction. One last thing will probably be the shape of the chin. So right now he has like this beautiful kind of anime eyes and anime nose, but I think that cutting his chin in like this straight line over here doesn't really fit the visual language of the head, because the head in like the eyes and the mouth feels a little bit more realistic. So probably the viewer will expect a bit more realistic structure to the skull. So I would totally give him a pointy chin that will probably fit the idea, or the style of the face. I think it will fit a little bit more. So great work. Let's see what we have over here. Okay. So first of all, I really like that you started with very simple lines, very simple shapes, like trying to get a very general idea. Like this here is very important work. I can tell you that for me, it actually took quite a while to be able to sit down and not rushing myself, like not rushing to go into details, uh, and not trying to get like the shape of the arm straight away when I'm saying like here I will put the arm. So just mark it, just say here there will be an arm. That's it. Like try to very just symbolize it. So this is very important. So great job on actually trying to simplify things. So I think that here you actually just started like moving and trying a certain direction, but I feel like the idea is not so clear yet. And then, like this one is already much better and much more interesting. Also have the chest. I do feel like that in the general design of it, it feels a little bit more like a pirate. And I guess a pirate is a treasure hunter as well, so it probably fits. But for me, when I thought of a treasure hunter, I thought more of maybe like Indiana Jones, kind of going in ancient structures and jungles and looking for the holy something. Um, so maybe more Uncharted and less Pirate of the Caribbeans. But I still think that it's a very cool idea and a great process that you got from here to here, and you got like your main shapes and your main divisions straight away. Uh, Also, can add maybe a few more tips for things that we can do like on this version. So right now, I feel like I imagine that this is the hair of the character. So right now, the hair is going with the same shape of the body. So we need to ask what is the meaning of it? Like if it's something that actually helps the design, or is it doesn't help the design. So if the body already have this line, do I really need the hair to go and have and create the same line again? Also, if we think a little bit of the silhouette of the character, in the silhouette it might look like the body has like fur or something like that. So I would probably try to create for the hair a different shape that plays with the shape of the body and not going and imitating the shape of the body. So that this will be something that I will probably try. And I also probably add some details to the coat. Right now, it feels a little bit more like a rope. It can, if it wasn't looking like a pirate, then just by the coat, I would feel it a rope, and he just got out of the shower. So maybe trying to add something that will make it noticeably to be like a coat or whatever. Think of what you will see specifically on a coat, and not necessarily on a rope. So I will probably give a little bit more there, and I will probably try to avoid for this specific idea like creating a belt that is tied, which makes it look a little bit more like a rope. So I probably go with something that is a little bit more tactical, a little bit more crude for the character. But very, very nice exercise here. So great work.
So it's looking like you've gone through about most of these. How does that look on your side?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe we haven't neglected anyone.
Okay, good.
Uh,
That's what I
yeah,
want to make most certain that we make sure we've covered everybody here, since the way that we're seeking to get registration working. I think in this case we got all the signups, but in terms of people actually joining and participating, we were a little bit more scrambled this time around. So um, Udi, I want to thank you so much for being willing to go over and work with everybody here. This is just being an observer on my side. It was so awesome to see this feedback and see it being done live with our Magma members here. So I just want to thank you so much for all of your time and everything you put into this lecture.
sure, man. I had a great time. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, for sure. On that note, for everybody here that's watching now and later, Udi is going to be streaming with us every other week. So the following Tuesday, which is going to be February the 28th, we will be back on at the same time. I'm going to drop you in the chat right now a couple things. Number one, if you're watching, getting updates on events and things like this, joining our Discord is the best place to get this information. So there's a link in the description, or rather in the comments, to join. I've also shared in there a link to our recent podcast on the Magma podcast with Udi. So if you want to get to know him, get to know his career, there's some really great just information on creative self-discipline and staying motivated and paving a way and paving a career, which Udi has some really awesome insights there. So definitely give that a watch as well. And the next session, Udi, do you want to drop maybe like an early shout out to the topic you want to cover then, or would you rather wait and we can make an announcement in Discord?
Hmm. Let's wait. I'll probably change my mind at
Yeah,
least 6, 7 times until we get
totally.
there. So yeah.
Definitely. Okay, cool. Let's plan on that. Definitely check out Discord. We've got a channel in there for Magma Classroom, so there's all information available there. And we'll be dropping some more stuff. And of course, drop us some comments, give us some feedback. Let us know how you guys enjoyed the session. I feel like this is incredibly valuable information, particularly on the replay value for people that weren't able to join. There's still so much information in just the process here. So thanks so much, man. It was such a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to the next one with you.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure.
Okay, everybody. Cheers. Have a great week. And join us for the Magma Clubhouse tomorrow. More information in Discord. And we'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
Bye bye.